According to everything we know about history, Göbekli Tepe just quite frankly shouldn't exist. The site of Göbekli Tepe is 12,000 years old, making it 6,000 years older than the known first civilization of the Sumerians. Now, we all know the official story. The Sumerians came first. They are the first recognized civilization. That's case closed. There is kind of nothing else to talk about. Until a shepherd found a stone sticking out of the ground in southern eastern Turkey in 1994, and what he found just completely broke the timeline in half. Hidden beneath Turkish soil lies a temple 6,000 years older than the accepted dating of the pyramids, built by people who, according to the textbooks, shouldn't have been able to build anything like this. But here it is, engineered with precision, appearing to be aligned with the stars, and intentionally buried for thousands of years. Archaeologists tell us that it was built by hunter-gatherers, small groups of people still chasing deer and picking wild fruit. But these same people somehow carved and moved 20-ton stone pillars, arranging them in perfect circular enclosures and covered them in animals and symbols and geometry. Now, this is where the first problem comes in, because this goes against everything we know about hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers normally roamed in small groups. They were constantly on the move. They weren't organized. They didn't have an abundance of food. And they certainly didn't have an abundance of time, because they were out trying to find their next meal. They were surviving. Literally, that is it. So those three components that I just said is very important in order to, put together the manpower and the time it would have taken to build Göbekli Tepe. You don't just do it for no reason. And according to the mainstream, it was done for ritual. So hunter-gatherers had no organization. They had no abundance of food, and they had no abundance of time, because their main purpose was to hunt and gather. So, does that really make sense to you? That they would all of a sudden, out of nowhere, decide to build a magnificent site like Göbekli Tepe and then bury it? And not to mention, Göbekli Tepe shows other signs of advanced knowledge. Because think about this, hunter-gatherers had no use of the wheel, no written language, and yet we see precision engineering at Göbekli Tepe on a scale that wouldn't return for thousands of years. Not only that, but Göbekli Tepe seems to be aligned with the heavens above, which is far beyond the known capabilities of hunter-gatherers, but more on that later. The simple fact is we have no idea who built Göbekli Tepe. There are no graves, no names, no written records. Hunter-gatherers building Göbekli Tepe is nothing more than just a theory that has been concocted by archaeologists, solely because it just fits more neatly into the timeline. Because without the hunter-gatherer theory, there would be big questions that would need to be answered about our past. One of those questions is the enigma of Pillar 43, the so-called Vulture stone. At first glance, it's strange. Vultures, a scorpion, a headless man. Some researchers believe it's no myth, it's astronomy, a sky map. Let's start with what we actually see. Pillar 43 stands in the oldest part of Göbekli Tepe, Enclosure D. A circular temple built before pottery, before writing, before civilization as we know it. On its face, a vulture lifting one wing towards a round disc, a scorpion below, and what looks like a human body missing its head. Every carving feels deliberate, like someone was telling a story symbol by symbol. Near the top, we see what looks like 3 bags, just like you see across the ancient world from Mesopotamia to Mexico. Whoever did this wasn't doodling. They were recording something they thought mattered, something they wanted remembered. This stone isn't just random art. Every mark, every creature, every line feels encoded. But the real big question is, what were they trying to tell us? Is Pillar 43 a story about death like some people say? Or is it a map to the stars, a warning of what may come one day from the heavens? And here's where things get a little disturbing. Around 10,900 BCE, Earth was hit by something. A sudden impact event, the Younger Dryas. Temperatures dropped, megafauna vanished, civilizations, if any existed, would have collapsed. Some believe Pillar 43 is a record of that event, because all over Göbekli Tepe we see carved animals, foxes, snakes, bulls, birds, but they aren't random. Some researchers believe they represent constellations. The scorpion on Pillar 43, possibly Scorpius. The bird holding the circle, maybe the sun. The headless man, a cosmic death. Put together, it suggests this site wasn't just a temple, it was an observatory, a calendar, maybe even a record of a global disaster. Now, what's bizarre is archaeologists, they will dismiss this out of hand. They will say, what utter nonsense. There's no way that Pillar 43 represents the constellations, but just look with your own eyes. I'm not asking you to believe what I'm telling you. I'm asking you to look with your own eyes and you will see the uncanny resemblance between the constellations and the carvings that are on Pillar 43. But yet, they just want you to believe that a group of hunter-gatherers that had nothing else on their mind other than getting their next meal and surviving managed to somehow come together and build this magnificent site and then bury it. Does that make sense to you? So I have a question for you. Is it really unreasonable to think that maybe a civilization was around before the Great Reset? The kind of civilization that the Sumerians and the Egyptians spoke about coming before them? And could it be possible that this civilization, maybe after the reset, decided to build Göbekli Tepe and to encode maybe a warning into it for us? Could it be a sky map? Could it be a warning to look up to the heavens, because maybe one day whatever destroyed them will come back to destroy us? And if you look at the top of Pillar 43, you can't help but notice what appears to be 3 small bags. Now, some people say they're not bags. I've heard some people say they're houses that represent the enclosures in Göbekli Tepe. Other people say that they are actually waves of an oncoming cataclysm, etc. However, these same bag symbols show up across the ancient world. They show up in Sumerian. They show up in Central America. Gods holding handbags of knowledge, wisdom, the seed of life. Now, what makes it more interesting is if they are the same bags that we see in ancient Sumerian and beyond, that is 6,000 years after Göbekli Tepe was built, then what the hell are they doing at Göbekli Tepe that is 12,000 years old? That right there is the mystery. In ancient Sumeria, they talk about the gods passing on knowledge to lesser advanced beings. We call them the Anunnaki. So were the Anunnaki survivors of a lost civilization that built Göbekli Tepe? Well, that's a whole nother video right there. But these same three bags show up across the ancient world. And just like I said earlier with the flood myth, it cannot be ignored. When you have cultures from around the world all talking the same myths, that just cannot be ignored as coincidence. Now, I'm not saying Göbekli Tepe is Noah's Ark. I know there are some researchers out there who have alluded to the idea that Göbekli Tepe could be connected to Noah. Now, I personally disagree with that. However, on the flip side to that, we cannot ignore that every culture in the ancient world had a flood myth. That cannot be ignored. So think about this for a second. If your world just got hit by fire from the sky, how do you make sure that no one forgets? You carve it in stone. You make it part of your rituals, and you link the sky to the dead. Göbekli Tepe wasn't destroyed by invading armies. It wasn't destroyed by a cataclysm. No, it was intentionally buried so it could last thousands of years. Why would any ancient culture want something to last for thousands of years if it wasn't sending a message to the future? The people who built Göbekli Tepe filled the entire site with rubble, tools, animal bones, layer after layer, like a massive time capsule. Archaeologists estimate hundreds of tons of debris were moved to seal the enclosures. Not every layer is man-made. Some might be natural, washed in over time, but the main fill was deliberate. So why would anyone bury the most advanced site on Earth at the time? To protect it? To mark the end of an era? Or to hide something that future generations might need to know? Because when a culture spends that much time and effort covering a masterpiece, you must ask yourself, why? And to answer that question, we have to excavate the site. And one recent discovery that was made in August of 2026 will actually help to answer that question. This new discovery could potentially rewrite what we know about Göbekli Tepe. You know, it's potentially that serious because obviously, so take away the trees. So the trees were removed and archaeologists decided to excavate that same area to see what was underneath there. And what they actually found were structures that appear to be resembling residential kind of rectangular buildings. And archaeologists, and this is all recent discovery, by the way, this is like a couple of days as of you watching this video. If you're watching this video when it's first published, you know, I learned about this like 2 days ago. But the excavated site is approximately 1,500 square meters and it was very shallow, which obviously again raises the question, why were these trees planted over shallow ruins? But archaeologists now potentially believe that these ruins were the residential houses of the people who lived at Göbekli Tepe. Now this is a big deal, guys, right? Because it has long been believed that no one, you know, inhabited Göbekli Tepe long term. It was a ritual site where people used to come together and perform rituals. You know, that was the explanation by the archaeologists. I mean, don't get me started on whether hunter-gatherers built it, because I personally don't think they did. But and this discovery would support my theory that they didn't, because hunter-gatherers were not organized. What we know about hunter-gatherers is they were not organized. So if we find a settlement, a big settlement, where we can, you know, basically prove that there were people living there and they were organized and, you know, it was a big settlement or whatever. I mean, I don't know the full details, so I'm not going to get quite into it. But what I'm trying to say to you is simple. If this is proven that these were residential places, then it could help prove that a civilization existed before the civilization of ancient Sumer, which is considered the first civilization. Now, just to be clear, when I say a civilization may have come before ancient Sumer, you know, people normally freak out because they think I am referring to an advanced civilization or aliens, or, you know, a civilization that is like a million years ahead of us. Look, there is no evidence for that. But what I am simply saying is civilizations have risen and fallen so many times. So why is it, you know, impossible to suggest that a civilization was around pre-Ice Age? I don't think it's so far-fetched to believe that there was an organized civilization that was thriving before the Younger Dryas event, and that this civilization may have built the unexplained megaliths and sites that we see around the world today. In fact, I have many videos about the Sumerians, who are considered the first civilization, but even they told us who they got the knowledge from. Even they looked backwards before them to say, hey, look, we got the knowledge from these people. Yes, they called them the gods, but were they really? If you are familiar with me and my channel, you know that I think that they were actually human survivors of a lost civilization, perhaps. You know, before you write me off as crazy, if this is the first time you've seen my content, go and check out the videos, because, you know, you might just think otherwise afterwards. But anyway, back on point, because to be a civilization, you obviously need to be organized, you need to have an abundance of food, you need to be able to communicate, you know, and the people who built Göbekli Tepe obviously communicated. You do not build a site like Göbekli Tepe, arranging T-pillars that weigh multiple tons and put them in circular enclosures and potentially align them to the stars. You do not do that if you are not organized. So I will be watching this discovery with eager eyes. It has long been a raging argument about the olive trees that I believe were planted like back in 2006 over the archaeological site of Göbekli Tepe. Now, many people have argued for and against these trees actually being at the site. Jimmy Corsetti is one of the main voices who was calling for the trees to actually be removed for a long time. And then you had people like Flint Dibble, the archaeologist, who was coming out on Twitter and actively defending the presence of these trees. He was saying that they actually help preserve the archaeological site, which is absolutely absurd. And unfortunately, Flint Dibble was not the only archaeologist that was running this narrative that the trees actually protect the archaeological site. I mean, just take a look at this tweet. Jimmy says, the question still stands. Were any of these trees planted over any buried ruins at Göbekli Tepe? And this archaeologist, he answers by saying, well, I am glad the trees are protecting the structures. I hope you are too. Protecting the site. Are you mad? We know, like, from modern times how trees can damage the foundation of houses, you know, and what's worse about it is that you don't actually know it's causing the damage until it pops up and breaks the driveway or comes through the wall. I mean, we've all seen pictures of that happening, and then you get told, well, the roots are quite extensive and your whole foundation is bad and you've got to move out. You know, that's like the worst case scenario. But the point I'm trying to make is we do not know how these roots are going to, you know, affect the site. You don't plant trees over ancient sites, especially a site as important as Göbekli Tepe. As of yesterday, it has been proven that these olive trees actually did cause damage to the archaeological site. The Turkish government have stated that the damage is mild, but there is damage. But the problem is there should not have been any damage in the first place, because these olive trees should not have actually been there in the first place. And back to Jimmy, he did in fact warn everybody about 2 years ago, and he was obviously ridiculed for it, but now proven. And what annoys me about archaeology is that with limited evidence, they seem to think that they have the past nailed down. And quite frankly, they just don't. And every time someone like myself will question the mainstream narrative, we will quickly get strapped with labels like pseudo-archaeologist, pseudo-scientist, etc. But the fact remains, we have no clue who built Göbekli Tepe. Now, here's the part that should probably keep you up at night. Only 5 to 10% of Göbekli Tepe has been excavated. There are more stones, more circles, more symbols still buried beneath the earth. 200 T-pillars, to be precise, are still buried in the mud. So for the mainstream to claim that they know exactly who built Göbekli Tepe and exactly what it was used for, with 95% of it still being beneath the mud, is quite frankly absurd. But unfortunately, we are never going to find out in our lifetime what Göbekli Tepe was, because Göbekli Tepe is not going to be fully excavated for another 150 years. Yes, you heard that right. Another 150 years. The reason given by archaeology is they are waiting for future technology to come available in order to safely excavate the site. I understand that excavation is actually destruction. I get that, but I do believe that in the 21st century, we have the capabilities to actually safely excavate the site now, just like other ancient sites that have been fully excavated. What makes Göbekli Tepe so special that it has to be referred to future generations? Now, I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of a conspiracy, but it does make you wonder. Is there another reason why Göbekli Tepe is not being fully excavated? So, could it be possible that a lost civilization came before the Sumerians and they are in fact responsible for building Göbekli Tepe?